curriculum compacting. One second. I do want to go ahead and show that if you did not sign up on PD Central, if you could go in and click this link where it says walk in, sign in. It's on the presentation that's linked also on the schedule. And so if you did not sign up on PD Central, you'll just click that and you'll sign in there. So that we have you registered. So it just looks like this. So that's if you did not sign up on PD Central. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started so that I can honor your all's time. My name is Christy Mudd. I have taught first grade through fifth grade, but I'm currently a deeper learning resource teacher for the district. I'm moving into that role this year. So it's going to look interesting because, you know, we're not going to be in the building. I know everybody's going to have different experiences this year. Okay. So I'm going to go over some strategies for gifted learners. I have taught at a gifted and talented camp for the past 9 years, and that's actually 4th through 8th grade. So I have experience with middle school students also. And then I taught an advanced placement gifted and talented class, 4th, 5th split for 4 years. So I have a lot of experience with gifted learners. I do also have my gifted and talented endorsement from the University of Louisville. Okay, so this is just something we're supposed to make sure we talk about at the beginning. So if you went this morning, you're probably familiar with this. There are 3-hour or 3 session blocks. You'll see them. You can see them in purple. You only have to attend 2 out of the 3 sessions in each block. So you will be getting just those 2 hours out of those 3 session blocks. So just make sure when you're on PD Central that you do only have to go to 2 per block to get your hours. I hope I explained that right because, so for example, if you chose the independent studies and then chose the keynote at 2, those would be your 2 sessions. Okay, also with Google Meet, it is harder for me to mute everyone. So if you can go ahead and mute yourselves, that would be great. And then also, there's a lot of people here. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat box and I'll try to come back and forth between here and answer any questions you guys might have. Also, I have my contact information on here that if you need to email me or anything at any point, I'm very open to sharing and communicating. Okay. So this is something I found recently. So like I said, I'm Christy Mudd. I'm a deeper learning resource teacher in the curriculum design and learning innovation department for JCPS. If you guys have the presentation open, if you click on this Jamboard, I just have kind of like a starting intro little thing. So if you want to choose a Post-it and put your name on it and how you're feeling today. I'm going to tell you that I feel like in the time of the pandemic, I feel like I'm just constantly in this okay world. So, oh, somebody else is on that one too. Oh, okay. I might just make a new one. So if you just want to take a second and put where you are, I'm going to put myself at okay for right now. And that's just kind of a check-in. And I also linked down here where it says Jamboard templates. Actually, there's an article that has 10 free, it's Jamboard templates that are already made. So I actually didn't create this. I found it online. So this is also something you could use with your students virtually to kind of just do like check-ins, see how they're feeling. Because obviously we do have to remember their social emotional needs on top of their academics. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. You guys can keep doing those Jamboards if you want, but I don't want to run out of time and I want to honor your all's time. So acceleration. Acceleration occurs when students move through the traditional curriculum at rates faster than typical. And I apologize, guys, but I did forget I'm supposed to record this. So just to let y'all know, this is going to be recorded. And I need to make sure I do that so that we don't, and I can't remember how to do that. Oh, there it is, right there. Okay. No, my apologies, guys. Okay, we're already recording. Okay, perfect. Okay, so acceleration occurs when students move through the traditional curriculum at rates faster than typical. It means matching the level and complexity of the curriculum with the readiness and motivation of the student. I've also linked down here the NAGC website. That was my best friend when working with gifted students because they have so many resources. So in JCPS, acceleration is not used very often. There's different reasons behind that. I've heard that, you know, they worry about the socialization of students. They worry a lot of times about, well, if they, you know, get accelerated in 4th grade, then when they get to 5th grade, you know, what if that 5th grade teacher is not ready to accelerate them? Things like that. But it's something that you can somewhat try within your own room. I'm going to show you how I did it. So forms of acceleration: grade skipping, early entrance to kindergarten or college, and content-based acceleration. So an example might be, if you have a 1st grader on a 4th grade reading level, you might, if your reading blocks match up, that student might go to another classroom for reading. If you have, you know, in middle school or high school, I know that they work more about like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, things like that. So it might be that they're allowed the opportunity to take a junior or senior level class, even though they're a freshman, which that is something that you kind of have to work with your admin, because I know that in some schools it is something that you have to have approval for to even be able to apply to those classes. Content-based acceleration, that would include dual credit courses, advanced placement courses, international baccalaureate programs, subject-based acceleration, and curriculum compacting. So these are all different ways that you could differentiate for your gifted students using acceleration. So I'm going to talk more about curriculum compacting because this is actually what I did with my gifted students, and it is a form of acceleration. Okay, so when you're compacting the curriculum, it pretty much means taking the, you know, what you're going to teach, and either there's a couple different ways. You can either move through the material more quickly. So if you have a gifted learner who doesn't necessarily have the knowledge beforehand, but learns very quickly, you might move through your curriculum quicker than if you didn't have gifted learners. And then there's also what I did. I offered an optional pretest. So this is something I created. Sometimes I would use the district common assessments. And honestly, I would just optional pretest to any student who wanted to take it, because also I didn't want to make it mandatory, because then my students, when I taught gifted learners, I taught all subjects. So sometimes I would have a student who was gifted in math and not in reading. And I didn't want to force a test on students if they didn't feel like they had mastered the material. But often if you offer a gifted student a pretest and you let them know that, you know, if they showed mastery on the material on the test, that they can what's called buy back time, meaning they can work on projects, or they could work on something that is of their choice, something that's more challenging. A lot of times my students would really opt into that because they really felt like they had mastered a lot of the material and they didn't want to have to sit through it again. In math or in other subjects, you can also offer the most difficult problems first. That means, you know, looking at the assignment that you're about to give and deciding what are the most difficult problems. And, you know, if there's 5, telling that gifted learner, okay, you can do just these 5. And if you show mastery, then you can move on to, like I said, a passion project, an enrichment activity, something that they choose. I did always plan out enrichment assignments prior to teaching the material. So if I knew a standard was coming up, not only did I consider what was grade level, but I also considered, okay, what about the students who have already mastered this? And I always had it ready, because depending on the standard and depending on what I was teaching, sometimes I had students who had mastered it and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I would have 10 students who had mastered it and sometimes I didn't. With gifted learners, refrain from drill or practice exercises for standards already mastered. A lot of times I feel like people think that gifted learners are just the well-behaved students. And that's not always true, because a lot of times gifted learners get bored, and that leads to talking or acting out and things like that. And sometimes your students who are acting out actually might be gifted, and they might be bored. So having them do 20 problems that they know they already know how to do might cause them to act out. And then keep track of the students involved in the enrichment activities. So I would have a lot of checklists. I was very well organized. And so I made sure I knew who was doing what. So let's say I went to teach a math standard, and on the pretest, I knew the student had already mastered that standard. I would make sure that I had that documented somewhere, so I knew how many students needed an enrichment activity instead. And so I would actually teach my lesson, and those students would be allowed to work on something else during that time. I'm going to check back in, make sure I don't have any questions. Sorry, guys. I know you guys probably know it's... Oh, thank you, Natalie. I'm glad you're here to help with the chat. Okay, so Natalie, just if you see questions, if you'll just unmute yourself and let me know, I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
okay.
That was a plan. I don't have any yet, but I'll let you know if you do.
Because Google Meet's just so hard, because you have to flip back and forth. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I also have linked the NAGC website again with curriculum compacting down here. These are just more resources. So when I first started teaching gifted classes, I got this book, Teaching Gifted Kids in Today's Classroom, and it helped me out a lot. It has a lot of strategies. It actually has a lot of reproducibles. Like, it has contracts that you can make with students. So what I was talking about with keeping track of the students who are working on enrichment, or who have opted to an alternative assignment, I would often have contracts, and myself and the student, we would agree, when we're working on this, and this, you can choose to, work on an approved project that we had already talked about, or an enrichment assignment that I had planned. And that student and I would come to that agreement that that's what they were working on. We also, though, my students always sat in on exit slips. So let's say, a student mastered all of the standards I'm teaching in cycle 1. What would happen is, during my daily lessons and like when I'm teaching, that student was working on an alternative assignment that we agreed upon on a contract. But when we would take an exit slip, that student would have to come back to join us, and they would take the exit slip. And that was just my way of continuing to check in to make sure that, the optional pretest wasn't a fluke or something. Maybe they guessed good that day. I don't know. But I always had them sit in the exit slips so that I really made sure that they were still on track for what they needed to learn. So if you click on both of these, it'll just take you to her website. And then also it'll take you to a presentation where she talks a little bit more about cluster grouping and curriculum compacting and the contracts and everything. I'm not going to go over that today, though. I actually move them really fast. Okay, so I also feel like a lot of times people don't know what to plan. So when you are planning out your lessons and you're thinking for the next week what I'm teaching, let's say you're teaching multiplication and you have 5 students who've mastered it. Like I said, you go ahead and you have things planned. So it does take a lot of pre-planning and thinking, and I do think it really helps to be organized, because that way you know exactly where your students are. So some examples of things I used. So it also comes down to really knowing your students. So I've had gifted learners who already knew all the material, who honestly had mastered 5th grade probably, and they really needed 6th grade work. I had gifted learners who hadn't necessarily mastered the material already, but I could teach it one day and they would have it mastered. So they didn't need 3 days. So you have all different types of gifted learners. So I might have, as an alternative assignment, the next grade level's work. I might have 6th grade math problems. I might have a novel that's on a high school reading level. But at the same time, I might have enrichment activities on the standard that I'm teaching for those learners who haven't necessarily mastered all the material, but they are very fast learners. So they should definitely be more complex and challenging if they're the grade level. So in gifted education, you'll hear a lot that gifted students should not be given more work. That happened to me a lot in high school. The difference between the advanced class and the non-advanced class was we got an extra project, which, felt a little unfair. So it shouldn't be more work. It should be more challenging work. It should be something that student needs. Like I said, you can accelerate through the standards more quickly. And sometimes I struggled with this because I was on a team and we did team plan, but I had to understand that what might take a non-advanced class 5 days might take my class only 3 days. And I had to recognize that I might have to move more quickly because otherwise they're going to get bored and they're going to start shutting down. Like I said, I often planned independent projects agreed upon by the learner and the teacher. So sometimes I would have projects already planned for them, but then sometimes I would simply say, what do you want to work on? What's something you're passionate about? And they just had to run the idea by me. And they knew in our contract, they understood that they had a space in the room they would go to. They understood that they had to stay somewhat quiet because this is going on while I was teaching. So they had to do that. So we had to have a lot of agreements and we had to have a lot of trust because we talked a lot about like if they were, making a lot of noise and things like that, they would have to rejoin the class because the rest of the class wouldn't be able to focus. So provide buyback time. And buyback time, like I said, it's when you give them most difficult problems first, or if you give them optional pretest. And it's being very honest with your gifted learners and saying, I recognize that you've mastered this material, do these 5 problems, and then you'll be able to work on something else, or you'll be able to do something of your choice. You can read a book. I'm not saying that I let them just like sleep or that I let them, do whatever they wanted. It was buyback time to work on something that they wanted to work on. And your gifted learners are gifted. They're smart. So they really are willing to reason with you. And they appreciate the fact, I feel like, that the teacher is recognizing that they've mastered this material and that they don't need 20 problems or they don't need this or the book's too easy for them. And when you have that trust and that agreement, then you'll notice that they stay on task. Even if the 5 problems that you gave them are still too easy for them, the fact that you've acknowledged that they've mastered, but you have to, I also tell my gifted learners a lot of times that, I do have to have some grades, or I do have to have, things in my grade book, or we do have to have some sort of assessments, and just being honest with them. Tips and suggestions, keeping updated data. So because here's the thing, like I said, I had learners who were gifted in different subjects. I had creative gifted students. I had students who were in all different areas of giftedness. So I would hate to just assume that because a student was gifted in math, that they're also gifted in writing and not give them the help they need in writing. So keeping updated data and really knowing where your students are, because if they need help and you're just like, oh no, just go do this project, then you've kind of, left them out and they're not sure what they're doing. Like I said, the learners still check in with me on exit tickets. So every time that we had an exit slip, they knew that was in our contract, that was in our agreement, that they would come back from their project or their enrichment assignment and they would do the check-in. And it was also understood that if you don't show mastery on this exit slip, then that following day, you're going to rejoin the class, and we're going to revisit these topics to make sure that you get it. Create a checklist of students' standards mastered and the contracts you have in your classroom. I'll tell you that in my experience with my gifted learners, a lot of times I only had like 2 to 3 who had truly mastered like all of 5th grade material. And majority of my gifted learners were just quick learners, like that we just had to move through the material a lot quicker. So the contracts weren't really something I couldn't handle because I usually only had a few contracts where students were actually doing independent projects. So at this time, I wanted to stop for a second, and if on the Jamboard you have questions or comments, You want to grab a Post-it. Yes, buyback time. Especially my truly gifted students who, you get your gifted learners who know sometimes, they know the system and they know that, you know what, they think the work's stupid. This is stupid. I already know how to do this, or, you know, things like that. And so being honest with them about buyback time really made my job easier, because I did still get my grades, because I had gifted learners who would refuse to do assignments because they were like, this is stupid. I know how to do this, but I had no documentation saying that they knew how to do that. So buyback time was really a big thing. So if you guys want to put some Post-its there, I'm going to come back to, and let me see in the chat. Somebody have any questions? Okay, awesome. All right. Questions, comments, no other ones? All right, I'll check back here just in a second and see if I have any questions or comments. Anonymous dinosaur. Sorry. And once again, I've linked NAGC's website down here about curriculum compacting. So I've linked pretty much anything that I have talked about. This is a website they also used a lot in my gifted education classes. Okay.
Hey, Christy, you got a question on one of your Jamboard sticky notes. Can you talk a little bit more about how you would manage the exit slips and check-ins for understanding? They love the idea of the organization as a challenge.
So the exit slip I gave them was the same one I was giving everyone. So I would just make 30 copies. So, sorry, I had to. So that wasn't the difficult part. It was more keeping track of who has actually mastered the material. So it was more like keeping my grade book and everything up to date, and, you know, making sure that when you give an assessment, grading them somewhat quickly and trying to make sure that they are in your grade book. Because if you take a couple weeks to grade it and then, you know, technically they've mastered the material, but you made that student sit in the lesson for 2 weeks because you didn't know they had mastered the material. It was more about that. So they got the same exit ticket. So I didn't have to organize as much because it was what I was giving to every student. It was more making sure that I stayed on top of my grading and things like that, so that my data was up to date, so that I knew who had mastered the material, so that I knew who could be pushed further. And as teachers, I know I personally, sometimes that was very challenging, was actually making sure if I gave an exit slip, trying to grade it quickly, so that I knew where my students were. And that's always probably one of the most challenging parts in teaching, is staying on top of your grading, because I mean, I'm sure you all know that it can really pile up.
Christy.
In the chat box, or is it on the Jamboard?
On the Jamboard. What do you do about students who complain that they want to be able to do independent projects too?
So one good thing was that I taught an advanced and gifted class. And so every student in there usually had some sort of strength. And I guess any classroom, you know, all your students have their own strengths. So in the very beginning of school, we would always talk about how, okay, and I would also be honest with them about my strengths and my areas of growth. Like, I was an advanced learner, but I actually struggled a lot with writing. And I tell my students how I was in all advanced classes. So I think they assumed that I was an advanced writer, and I don't think I was. And it still is a huge struggle for me, but I didn't get any help because they just assumed I was an advanced writer because I was in all advanced classes. And I tell them how, like, how hard that was. And so we're just real honest, and we talk about, like, our different gifts and our different areas of growth. So like I said, I had a student who was on, in 5th grade, was 8th, 9th grade math, but was on a 2nd grade reading level. So we always had, and usually it was individual, but that student understood that if he got to sit out of the lessons in reading, he would fall even further behind. So everyone, I feel like, kind of had their own strengths. So like but during math class, he got to work on the alternative assignment. I I guess we just talked a lot. We talked a lot about it. We had whole class discussions about how everyone has things they need to work on. And if you haven't mastered the material, you can't work on these things. But I might not have had much pushback because I did a lot of project-based learning. I did a lot of inquiry lessons. So I feel like even the students who didn't get to work on their independent projects still had things that were enjoyable to them. And we talked a lot about how they knew they needed it. They knew they needed the math instruction or things like that. They knew that they might not pass the test if they didn't get the lesson. So it's definitely hard. I'm not saying there weren't times when kids were like jealous of like, hey, look what they're getting to work on. But that was just a moment where we had to have that conversation about everyone has their own gifts, everyone has their own areas of growth, and that's just how it is. And, acknowledging each and every one of ours. And that way they kind of knew, oh, wait, in math class, I am having to sit in the daily lessons, but in reading, I'm getting to read we have choices of novels, and I'm reading the hardest novel that is in that, so it's definitely a balance. And I'm not saying it was always perfect, but it worked. I mean, and like I said, the students who I had contracts with, they also knew that they couldn't really draw a lot of attention to themselves. It was part of the contract. And if you couldn't do something independently and somewhat quietly, then you didn't get to do it. So and that wasn't always perfect, but when you have 30 students and you're all in one small room. So thank you, Natalie. Let me see if I can look at it one more time. Self-motivation. Let's see. So with gifted learners, motivation can be a big thing. Everybody thinks that gifted learners are just always 100% motivated. And that has not been my experience with working with gifted learners, because like I said, a lot of times they were smarter than me. And so they knew, I giggle because I can like picture some of my students who they knew that they were smarter than me. They knew that they knew some of the material. So they knew they didn't have to do it. A lot of times they were just like, this is stupid. So, I mean, it came down to also having those conversations again. Sometimes I'd say, okay, what are you interested in? And so I would do a lot of surveys and a lot of interest inventories, because if sometimes I didn't find things that they were passionate about, I couldn't get some of them to do the work. And the thing is I knew they knew how to do it. I knew they knew how to do some of the work, but I didn't have any documentation of it. So motivation with gifted learners, especially if they're underachieving, can be difficult. And it's all about figuring out what they're interested in and being real with them. I feel like I talk to them a lot and I say, look, I know that I'll even sometimes say, like, I know you're probably smarter than me, but hey, I've passed fifth grade. You have to do this so that we can, you can get past fifth grade and things like that. So I would be honest with them. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to move on to personalized learning. So this was also what I did to differentiate. This is probably even more than curriculum compacting. This is probably what I used most often to differentiate for my gifted learners. So personalized learning, I found that a lot of people have very different definitions of personalized learning. And so in personalized learning, content, pacing, sequence, technology, learning models, learning spaces, audience, and purpose, and any learning component are adjustable according to the knowledge demands, curiosity, genius, and learning purpose of each student. The end result is ideally a learner who is literate in both the content and process of learning. So a lot of times people think that if you just throw technology at kids, that it's personalized learning. Or, if I just change the topic of my lesson, then it's personalized learning. It's actually kind of a little bit of all of it. So you kind of have to bring in all of those things. This comes down to, once again, really knowing your student. I spend so much time at the beginning of the year getting to know my kids, because it just helps throughout the entire year. I do a lot of building community and everything like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
To tag off that, you got a question in the chat about did you have behavior challenges with your gifted students, like severe tier 3, but they were also gifted in like math or some other area? How did you deal with that?
Yes, and often, so if you've been to some other sessions, you might have also heard of twice exceptional or 2E students. So I often had a lot of severely autistic children in my gifted classes, and they would have an IEP. They would have, their hours with their ACE teacher. And so I would also service their giftedness. So it's just like any other classroom. I mean, finding your balance, learning about the student. I guess my answer would just be, it's just like any other classroom where you have to figure out how to make it work. And did it sometimes disrupt the classroom? Yes. And did it sometimes disrupt what was going on? Yes. But it also comes back to, like I said, I spend a lot of time getting to know the students. I would really study their triggers. I would really study what they were interested in, so that I could really gauge like what I could plan my lessons around things that would interest them, not just those students. But when I would personalize learning in my next thing, a lot of times I would consider those students in what I was doing. That's a very big myth. And if you went to the one about myths in gifted education, you'll probably find that most people think that gifted learners are all, they're well-behaved children. Like some people think that's all that giftedness is. It's like, oh, that child is very well-behaved. They're gifted, or they're advanced. And that's not the case. And like I said, if you've ever taught gifted learners, you'll know that they know very quickly that they know the material. And so a lot of times they know that they don't have to listen, and they know that they can do, oh, I don't need to listen to this, so I can do whatever I want. And that might be disrupting all the people around me. So I think by having those contracts, and because the thing is a lot of gifted learners do have passions, though, really strong passions. And so if they're able to buy back their time, and they know that they can use actual class time to work on something that they want to do, then you have a little bit of less disruptions because it's something they're interested in. And I would be pretty flexible as long as it was something that I know involved learning. I mean, even if it was coding or things like that. So there's obviously never a perfect answer for that. And I will say, I think it took a lot of work to really build the capacities, build the communities, build the relationships, also build the trust, because let's be honest, most students have not had that experience where they're given a lot of control over what they're learning and how they're learning. And so I had to follow through. So if I made a contract and said they could work on this, I had to make sure that I had it ready. I had to make sure I had enrichment assignments ready, because they had to see that I truly am thinking about them and thinking about how I can challenge them. And sometimes that took a couple months to realize, oh, wait, she really does know that I know this, and she really is trying to change it up.
Kristen, you got another question that kind of follows the coattails of that one. I know that you're no longer going to be a regular homeroom teacher, but what are your ideas and suggestions for teachers to build this community and make these connections going into NTI or possibly virtual learning? Because we got teachers curious how to go about that in this new environment.
Yeah, and that's challenging. And I'm actually, I think it's full though, but I'm doing a presentation with Alan Young in a couple weeks on building community. And part of it's going to be about building it in person, but most of it's going to be about virtually, because we know that that's how it's going to happen. Things like the Jamboards, I purposely plugged these Jamboards in, because I know this might seem superficial, but just not jumping right into a lesson and just really having conversations about how kids are feeling and about how their day is. Those are things that you can do. I think they will really help build community. I know that some suggestions I'm going to give and that I've seen is teachers who had sessions like Google Meets and stuff like that, where there was no academics. It was simply games or discussions or partner talks and things like that. So having those times where it's not about the academics, it's about, the learner. I found on Slides Mania, I found an All About Me presentation that I'm going to borrow. and suggest to teachers. So each slide has all about me, and it has like their favorites, their favorite foods, and they can even take a picture of themselves, and there's a slide for every student. So that's something I would kind of do in the classroom. So that's something I'll do, you know, I would do virtually. Something I wanted to do and I didn't do in the spring, because I was in the classroom last year, so I taught NTI in the spring, was I saw teachers had Google Meet times just for socializing. So the teacher wouldn't talk, but the teacher would be on the Google Meet just to make sure, you know, students didn't do anything they weren't supposed to be doing. But, you know, for like 30 minutes, the teacher would mute themselves and the kids could just talk to each other. And having that socialization is extremely important. I had a weekly question. It was a would you rather. So on our Google Classroom, it would, you know, just to kind of break the ice for the week, it would say like, you know, would you rather live in outer space or in the deep ocean? And then the kids would comment, and they would comment to each other. I think that also I wish I would have done more like breakout rooms type ordeals where the kids could kind of, you know, break into little partners, and so they could do more like group work. I wasn't very good at that in the spring. But those are things I've considered. So it's definitely not going to be easy. But there are things out there, and I actually have an entire, I've started a document with all kinds of sites that have those. I don't really know how to get to them to you all, but anyway, I will be touching on that in a presentation in a couple weeks, and I'm sure we'll record it. And so maybe I could see if the Gifted Institute wants to put it on their site also. I'm doing an entire session on building community, virtually and in person. All right, Natalie, we good? And I hope that answered your question. I don't have all the answers. I feel like I have ideas.
Yeah, I think that
okay.
Cool.
Okay, so like I said, personalized learning was probably the #1 way that I serviced my gifted students, because like I said, most of my gifted learners didn't come to me already knowing the material. Most of them were just very fast learners. So it was like, I would bore them pretty quickly, even though they had never heard the material before. So with personalized learning, I had leveled stations. So I know these are small, but you can also click on them and see them larger. Oh, no. And I don't know if just because I'm sharing one window, if you all can actually see that. So, Natalie, I'm going to see what you.
Sorry, I'm trying to take attendance for you too.
Yes, okay, I've got the attendance app. Can you see the, like, is it my Olympia Academy reading stations up on your screen right now?
No.
Okay, I know I shared just my Chrome. Let's see. I'm going to show you all this. So this is what I did. I'll just do my entire screen. That way you guys can see it. This is what I did when I taught 4th and 5th grade reading. So everything was leveled. So I know here it has steps, but every station I had was standards based, and then also it was leveled. So I talked to my gifted learners, and they understood that they could start at level 1 if they felt like they weren't comfortable with the material, and they could build up to level 3. Or they understood that they could start at level 3. So if my gifted learners felt like they could go straight to level 3 and know exactly what they were doing, then they could go straight there. Because also, if they completed level 3 at all the stations, they were allowed to move on to a project of their choice, or a choice activity. So now, obviously, I did have to check, like I did look at their level 3 work to make sure that it was actually quality work and they didn't just zoom through it. But this was something that I really felt like my gifted learners appreciated, because once again, we did have a lot of conversations around self-assessment and thinking about how I learn and where my strengths are. Because I have some students who would start at level 3 and then they'd be like, oh, this was too hard, because they all kind of build on each other. So they just kind of got more difficult as you went. I did that also for math. So math, I had, not only I had, my stations were math with partner, math with technology, and math with me. I know math with partners are a little bare here, but I usually had more. And so everything was leveled. And here you'll see with this specific standard, the geometry standards, I had quite a few students who had mastered the 5th grade material, so they could actually even do 6th grade work when they were at that station. So this was something that was linked. I know a lot of times people bring up technology. I didn't have, I wasn't one-to-one. So some of the stations were technology-based and some weren't. So like the ones that weren't technology-based would just have one computer where they could see the instructions, but it wouldn't, the kids wouldn't be working on it. And then there were stations that did have technology and they did work on them. I also linked here the choice boards. I know our gifted teacher, gifted staff, I guess I'm not really sure what they would be called, but I know they worked on these. So just like the choice boards that we had in the spring, there were also gifted and talented ones. And so they take you here. So you'll see gifted primary talent pool, gifted grades 4 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. So I actually linked this and sent this out to my parents because I did have some parents who were like, you know, my child needs more, because with NTI, I know we were all trying to find that fine balance. What's too much work? What's not enough? Some people wanted more work. Some people wanted less. So that was one way that I kind of helped that out too, is I sent them those choice boards so that they could have something else to work on. Yep.
Real quick in the chat, we had some questions that I don't think you're going to be able to answer, but people are hoping that JCPS will use Zoom. But I think there's some privacy issues as why JCPS is restricting us to Google Meets. So I kind of answered that one for you. And then someone asked about breakout rooms with Google Meets, which also is an extension that can be added. I'll be happy to share the link for that. I just wanted to chime in on that because people were asking in the chat. So
yeah, I know Zoom's been trying to fix their issues with their privacy, but right now I think it's probably still going to be Google Meet.
Well, honestly, I think we're a Google district. We're trying to stick with everything Google as JCPS, I believe.
I was going to say I actually kind of find it easier too. I know it takes some getting used to, but as far as the fact that it's in my Google Suite, you know, when I record, it goes straight to my drive. Like there's just some things that I'm like, I think because I'm already using so much Google that it actually helps. So I definitely know that I'm much more familiar with Zoom, but I do see the benefits of using Google. And yes, Natalie mentioned that they did show us there is an extension you can get for the breakout rooms. I have not figured them out yet.
I used them earlier in the session and it was very user friendly. The issue I'm having with this extension is being able to see everybody under the attendance roster. But with the Google Meets one here, I'm sorry for hijacking your session, Christy.
You're fine.
It'll take like 2 seconds. When you have this extension, you'll have the option to create under the attendance tab. There'll be like a little squiggly person. At the bottom, it'll say show group generator, and then you click how many groups you want, and then it'll generate them. And then you just copy the groups into the chat, and it'll say, you know, for group 1, this person, this person, this person. For group 2, this person, this person, this person. You also can copy the links to their meets, and then they can go into those links and have those individual breakout rooms. One thing we learned this morning is mute yourself in the main Google Meet, because we would go into the breakout rooms and then there'd be voiceovers and be chaos. So like if this was our main Google Meet, we'd ask everybody to mute yourselves and then go click your links and talk to your people there. And then you as a teacher or facilitator of the Google Meet can click on the links and hop in and listen to your students and, you know, chime in. So there's that.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. So some other forms of personalized learning. So RAFs, if you've gone to any of Tiffany Morrison's sessions, she actually created this one. RAFs are a good way to personalize too. Once again, probably for students who are quick learners, not necessarily someone who's mastered all of your material. So I've also linked, if you click on here, it'll take you to a site about RAFs where you can learn what they are, how to create your own. But pretty much it allows some student voice and choice where they get to, you can differentiate by letting them choose the role, choose the audience, choose the format, and choose the topic. And also, since you're creating them, you could always make one pathway like more difficult for your gifted learners. Same with choice boards. You could always have some of the options that are more challenging instead of having to create an entire new choice board. And then lastly, project-based learning, which I'll be presenting on Wednesday also. I use project-based learning as a differentiation technique. I mean, I think project-based learning is great in general for all learners. And you'll probably see throughout the Gifted Institute that a lot of the strategies we share are honestly great strategies for every learner. It's really about knowing the learner and personalizing things for that student. But project-based learning, and one of the reasons, project-based learning allows a lot of voice and choice, which most gifted learners want. They want that. They want those opportunities to choose what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn it. So with project-based learning, you can do a lot of voice and choice. You can, a lot of times, because it's a project, students can kind of take it and run with it. So they can, really do advanced work even without you setting out, saying this is what you need to do. So like, for example, this is one of my, I don't know if you guys will be able to hear it. Can you hear it, Natalie? I know it's quiet.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, so this is just, my students did a documentary. We did a project-based learning unit around how we can advocate for Native American rights. And this group chose to do a documentary on the Sioux tribe. And they did they really studied the past of the tribe and then kind of what's their current existence, like what, how are they living today? And like I said, especially with adding in technology and things like that, you can really make it more challenging. Also, from my experience, I mean, this is listed as a characteristic of gifted learners, but I've also found that my gifted learners that I've had, are huge on social justice. They're very empathetic and they really want to make change. And so that project around advocating for Native American rights, I feel really fit into their passions because a lot of them, really wanted to affect change and really change the world. So anytime you can tie in social justice to those project-based learning units, I think also really helps your gifted learners. Okay. So that is the end of really my strategies that I use for gifted learners throughout my day. Here is my contact info. I am on Twitter. I tweet a lot. So if you want to follow me, there is also a Google form reflection that you guys are supposed to fill out. And so if you are on my presentation, if you click that, it'll take you to it.
Just to clarify on that though, don't fill out the reflection until you're done with all your Institute sessions.
Oh, I thought it was after every single one.
It's a one-time thing because you're going to go through and there'll be a checkbox for you to click all the different ones that you've attended during this whole 3-day Institute. So hold off on taking it until you've are done with. So if this is the last session you're going to take, then go ahead and do it. But if you're coming back tomorrow or later this afternoon or Wednesday, wait until the end. You only have to do it one time.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you knew that because I did not know that. So I know I finished a little early, but that'll give y'all maybe a moment to, grab a bite to eat for the last session, maybe. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and I'm more than willing to answer them. Or if you want suggestions, like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of experience working with gifted learners all the way up to 8th grade. I don't have as much experience with high school, but I was a gifted learner in high school. So I feel like I have some insight there. So I really appreciate you all coming and listening to me talk about strategies for gifted learners. It's a passion of mine. A lot of times gifted learners are some of your most underserved because for lack of a better way of seeing it, a lot of people just know they're going to test well. And so if they're going to test well, they don't need any more of my attention. And that's just unfair. And that's how you also get a lot of behavior issues out of gifted learners because they're tired of doing stuff they already know. So they do need differentiated lessons. They do need to be supported. If they're truly gifted, they have a gifted service plan that you're supposed to follow. So just keep them in mind. And it doesn't always have to be something elaborate. Sometimes my old school had the program My Math, and in the program they had an enrichment book. Sometimes that's all the enrichment was for that day. So it doesn't have to be something blow your mind huge. And they would do that assignment instead of the work. They wouldn't do it on top of it. They would do it instead. So like I said, it's not more work, it's more challenging work, and just keep your gifted learners in mind because they really do deserve our attention. So if you guys don't have any questions for me, you can feel free to leave. I know somebody just put something in the chat box about the form.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I don't know why we're getting mixed messages. But if you go and look at, I mean, there's no harm in filling it out more than once. But when you look at it, you'll see that it's more conducive for an end of everything because you're selecting sessions that haven't even existed yet. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you for coming. I think Colin is next, right? Natalie?
Yeah, he is next. He's the keynote speaker. If you have time, I strongly encourage you to stay and join his link. He is incredible.
He is amazing. So even if it's your third session, I would definitely go to his.
Yes, he's an outside from JCPS. Very great author, so check him out.
All right. Make sure there wasn't any questions. We got all the questions in the chat, didn't we?
I think so. You're getting a lot of thank yous and compliments right now, but I don't think we have any more questions. People are filing out, so.
Yeah. Some familiar faces. There are some people. Have you been on sessions all day, Natalie?
I've been in most. I did not do a 12 to 1. I took a lunch break at that point.